The morning sun spilled across the glass towers of downtown Detroit. People hurried through the streets, coffee in hand, chasing their daily routines. Inside the grand lobby of Summit National Bank, a storm was quietly brewing, one that would change the entire future of the institution. At the center of the scene stood Daniel Carter, a tall, poised black man in a charcoal gray suit. His appearance was neat, precise, and calm. His shoes were polished, his portfolio tightly held in his hand. But behind the calm exterior was a man with influence far beyond what anyone in that lobby could imagine. As Daniel waited to check in, the branch manager, Robert Hale, stepped forward. His expression was sharp, his movements impatient. He looked at Daniel not as a potential client, but as a problem standing in his way. "You people always waste time," Robert muttered, his voice loud enough for customers nearby to hear. The entire lobby fell into an uneasy silence. Conversation stopped, glances shifted. Daniel's grip on his portfolio tightened, but his face remained composed. Robert didn't stop there. He moved closer, brushing Daniel's shoulder as if to push him aside, and deliberately knocked the leather portfolio from his hands. Papers spilled across the polished marble floor. Premium business cards, investment agreements, and legal documents. "Where's your proof of a real appointment?" Robert demanded, his voice rising as though he wanted an audience. "If you're here for business, show it." Daniel knelt, gathering his belongings with steady hands. He did not allow Robert's insult to shatter his dignity. Every motion was deliberate, calm, unshaken, though anger simmered just beneath the surface. "Security," Robert called, waving his hand toward a nearby guard. "Keep an eye on him." The security guard stepped forward, eyes fixed on Daniel as if he were an intruder. "Sir, I'll need to verify your identity," the guard said firmly. Daniel rose to his feet, jaw tight, and handed over his identification card. Robert barely looked at it before pushing it back across the counter. "Anyone can get fake ID these days." Robert scoffed. The words cut deeper than the act itself. To the crowd watching, Daniel was being painted as a fraud, but Daniel didn't argue. Instead, he slipped his phone from his pocket and typed a short message. A calm thought settled in his mind. Time for Plan B. No one in that room knew the truth. The man they were humiliating was not a random visitor. Daniel Carter was about to become the bank's largest investor, with power strong enough to shape its destiny. And in that moment of insult, his path shifted. What was supposed to be a meeting about investment would soon become a story about justice, power, and change. Daniel Carter arrived at Summit National Bank that morning with every detail carefully in place. His suit was tailored but not flashy, his tie a modest navy blue, his watch simple and elegant. He preferred subtlety, never flaunting the wealth he had built over decades. In his leather portfolio were documents that could reshape the future of the bank. Inside was a proposal to invest over $1 billion from his medical technology venture fund into the bank's struggling digital division. While Daniel carried himself with calm confidence, the bank itself was in disarray. Robert Hale, the 52-year-old branch manager, was already under pressure. 3 of his tellers had called in sick, the lines were spilling out the door, and the regional director was scheduled to visit the next day. His shirt collar felt too tight, sweat gathering at the edge of his temples. He saw Daniel as just another obstacle in an already impossible morning. Daniel approached the reception desk with a polite smile. "Good morning. I have a 9:30 appointment with the investment division. My name is Daniel Carter." The receptionist, a young woman named Emily who had only been on the job for 2 weeks, frowned as she searched her computer. "I'm sorry, sir. I don't see an appointment under that name." Before Daniel could reply, Robert appeared at her side, his eyes narrowing as he scanned Daniel's face and suit. "Is there a problem here?" "I have a scheduled appointment with the investment division," Daniel said calmly. "It may be listed under Carter Ventures rather than my personal name." Robert didn't bother checking the system. He leaned against the counter with a dismissive wave. "Everyone says they have an appointment. You'll need to wait like everyone else." "I understand you're busy," Daniel replied evenly. "But this is a confirmed meeting about a significant investment opportunity." "Sure it is," Robert said flatly. "Take a seat. We'll get to you when we get to you." For the next hour, Daniel sat in a hard plastic chair in the crowded waiting area. He watched as Robert personally greeted an older white couple the moment they entered the lobby, escorting them past the line. He observed a young professional rush in, mentioning he was in a hurry, and Robert immediately arranged assistance for him. Each time Daniel politely approached the desk to follow up, he was met with the same dismissive response. 2 hours passed. Daniel's phone lit up with a call from the CEO of the bank, unaware that their billion-dollar guest was being treated as an unwanted inconvenience. 3 hours passed before Daniel finally rose again. The crowd had thinned, yet still no one had called his name. "Excuse me," Daniel said, his tone calm but firm. "I've been waiting nearly 3 hours and I'm significantly late for my appointment upstairs." Robert didn't look up from his computer. His fingers tapped across the keys with exaggerated slowness. "Everyone waits their turn. Your time isn't more valuable than anyone else's." He paused and added with a sharp edge, "You people always think your time matters more." The words hung heavy in the air. A woman standing nearby shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting to the floor. Daniel's face remained composed, though his jaw tightened ever so slightly. "I would like to speak with another manager," he said, his voice steady. Robert finally looked up, scanning Daniel from head to toe, refusing to see the professionalism before him. "I am the highest authority here today. If you're unhappy with our service, you might try the community bank down the street. It may be more your kind of place." The insult was unmistakable. Daniel drew a slow breath, keeping his composure intact. Above them, 14 floors higher, the investment division sat in growing confusion. Franklin Price, the CEO, checked his watch again. "This isn't like Daniel Carter," he muttered. "He's never late for a meeting." Sarah Lee, the vice president of acquisitions, set down her phone after yet another failed attempt to reach him. "This doesn't make sense. His team confirmed yesterday. This is a $1.2 billion meeting. If we lose this opportunity, the rumors of acquisition will only grow stronger." Downstairs, Daniel Carter remained in the lobby, patient but resolute, while Robert Hale smirked at the man he believed to be wasting everyone's time. What Robert could not yet see was that his every word, every sneer, was setting into motion a chain of events that would soon turn his entire world upside down. The tension in the lobby grew heavier with each passing minute. Daniel Carter stood once more, his voice calm but edged with steel. "I have an appointment regarding a significant investment opportunity with your bank." "I have been more than patient." Robert Hale laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. "Sure you do. Listen, if you don't have actual banking business to conduct, I'll have to ask you to leave. We serve real customers here." Daniel's phone vibrated in his pocket. Another call from upstairs. He ignored it. Instead, he looked Robert directly in the eye. "Tell me, Mr. Hale, what exactly does a real customer look like to you?" For the first time, Robert faltered. His name tag gleamed on his chest, though he had never introduced himself. The lobby had grown quieter again, a few customers watching nervously. Moments later, the desk phone rang sharply. Robert grabbed the receiver without breaking eye contact. Summit Branch Manager Hale speaking. His expression changed slightly as he listened. "One moment, please." He put the call on hold, the blinking red light pulsing like a warning. "So," Robert said, lowering his voice to something darker, "you're claiming to be Daniel Carter, the one they're expecting upstairs." "I am Daniel Carter," Daniel replied, reaching calmly for his wallet. "Of course you are," Robert sneered. He raised his voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "And I suppose I'm the chairman of the Federal Reserve." Daniel slid his driver's license across the counter. "My identification." Robert gave it the briefest glance before shoving it back. "Anyone can buy a fake ID these days. You expect me to believe you're some billionaire investor? This is a scam. A pretty sophisticated one, but still a scam." Gasps rippled through the lobby. Customers shifted, staring at Daniel with suspicion as though the accusation might be true. He felt their eyes on him, heavy with doubt and judgment. It was a weight he knew too well, one he had carried his entire professional life. "This is absurd," Daniel said, his voice taut with controlled anger. "Call upstairs and verify my identity." "Oh, I'm sure your accomplice upstairs would happily vouch for you," Robert said coldly, waving to the guard. "I believe this man is attempting fraud. Escort him out." A woman stepped forward from the line, her face flushed with anger. "This is completely unprofessional. You haven't even checked his credentials properly." Robert dismissed her with a sharp gesture. "Ma'am, I'm handling a security situation. Please step back. The blinking hold light continued its steady pulse, ignored as the executives upstairs waited in frustration. Sarah Lee finally set her tablet aside. Enough, I'm going down there myself. Something isn't right. Back in the lobby, Robert stepped around the counter, standing so close to Daniel that it was meant to intimidate. Empty your pockets. Let's see what else you're carrying. Absolutely not, Daniel answered firmly. I will not be humiliated further. That's what I thought, Robert barked. You have no right to be here. Either comply or leave immediately. At that exact moment, the elevator doors slid open. Sarah Lee stepped into the lobby, her eyes instantly locking on the confrontation. She saw the security guard edging closer, the gathered crowd, and Daniel Carter standing tall in the middle of it all. Dr. Carter, she called out, striding forward. Robert spun toward her. Ma'am, please stand back. This individual, Sarah interrupted, her voice rising, is the neurosurgeon and venture capitalist our entire executive team has been waiting for all morning. The room seemed to freeze. Conversations halted. All eyes turned to Robert, whose face drained of color. Still, he clung to his defensive stance. There must have been a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Daniel's voice was quiet, but it carried through the entire lobby. Security protocols that somehow include racial profiling and public humiliation? Sarah's face flushed with embarrassment. Dr. Carter, I am so deeply sorry for this. Daniel shook his head. I won't be staying for the meeting. I need to reconsider certain aspects of this potential partnership. He buttoned his jacket, his posture regal despite the insult he had endured, and turned toward the exit. Through the glass doors, his black sedan waited at the curb, his driver standing alert. Robert Hale's authority collapsed in that instant, but what no one realized yet was that the humiliation Daniel suffered that morning was about to set in motion something far greater than any single meeting. It would ignite a reckoning that would shake the entire foundation of Summit National Bank. The glass doors closed behind Daniel Carter as he stepped into the cool air outside. His driver, Marcus, quickly opened the rear door of the sleek black sedan. Daniel entered without a word, his back straight, his jaw tight, his hands clenched just enough to reveal the anger he fought to control. As the car pulled away, Marcus glanced in the mirror. You all right, Doc? I saw the way that manager treated you. He had no right. Daniel loosened his tie, his fingers trembling slightly, though his voice remained steady. 30 years, Marcus. Hopkins for medical school, a neurosurgery fellowship at Mayo. Built a technology company worth billions, and still, he let the words trail off. Still treated like you don't belong, Marcus finished quietly. Daniel turned his face to the window, watching the city blur past. This will be the last time. The very last time from this institution. He scrolled through his phone, ignoring the 15 missed calls from Summit's executive team. Instead, he dialed his chief financial advisor. Janet, assemble the team for an emergency meeting in 30 minutes. Full digital attendance, highest security protocols. It's time to execute Project Watershed with modifications. Inside Summit's headquarters, panic was spreading. Sarah Lee rushed into the conference room where Franklin Price, the CEO, and the executive team waited. He's gone, she said breathlessly. Dr. Carter left the building. There was an incident downstairs with Robert Hale. What kind of incident? Price demanded, his face draining of color. He was made to wait for hours, accused of fraud. Nearly had security called on him. He was told to empty his pockets to prove he belonged there. Sarah explained, her voice tight with shame. Price closed his eyes. Dear God, the $1.2 billion investment is gone. That's the secondary concern, Sarah pressed. The way he was treated? If this ever becomes public, Price was already dialing. Get Hale on video conference now. His voice rose with fury as the manager's face appeared on the screen. What the hell happened down there? There was a misunderstanding, Hale began defensively. This man didn't properly identify himself. He looked like he was trying to skip the line, claiming to have some big appointment. So you assumed he was lying? Based on what exactly? Price barked. Sir, we have procedures, Hale stammered. He didn't fit the profile of our typical high-net-worth clients. If he had just explained who he was... Stop talking, Price snapped. You've said more than enough. Across town, Daniel's office buzzed with urgency. His advisors, attorneys, and strategists gathered around a long conference table, both in person and virtually. Daniel rose to address them, his expression resolute. Our original plan was simple. a direct investment in Summit's digital division. That plan is dead. Today changed everything. He tapped a button and the display on the wall lit up with charts showing Summit's stock ownership structure. Instead, we move forward with a three-phase strategy. Phase 1. Quiet acquisition of shares through our holding companies. I want significant ownership without triggering disclosure requirements for as long as possible. His general counsel leaned forward. And the endgame, Daniel? Revenge? Daniel shook his head firmly. Not revenge. Reform. Phase 2 will be a full investigation into Summit's discriminatory practices. Not just against me, but against every client who has ever been mistreated. And Phase 3? He paused, meeting the eyes of everyone present. Phase 3 is where we use our leverage to force meaningful change in how this institution operates. His chief investment officer studied the numbers. We have the capital to quietly acquire up to 30% without disrupting the market too much. If we move carefully, no one will know it's us until it's too late. Then let's begin immediately, Daniel said. His voice was calm, but the fire in his eyes left no doubt. What had started as an insult in a crowded lobby was about to grow into something far larger. Summit National Bank had no idea that its newest enemy was also its most powerful shareholder in waiting. 1 week passed, and the plan unfolded with precision. Through 7 different holding companies, Daniel Carter's team quietly acquired nearly 12% of Summit's stock. It was not enough to trigger disclosure requirements, but it was more than enough to cause a ripple of unease within the bank's leadership. The stock price rose slightly from the sudden trading activity, but no one suspected Daniel was behind it. Meanwhile, Daniel met with Ramirez Investigations, a private firm known for exposing corruption. In a quiet office overlooking the river, the lead investigator slid a thick folder across the table. In just 1 week, we've documented 28 instances of discriminatory practices at Summit's branches here in Detroit. Longer wait times for minority customers. Extra identification required. Loan applications rejected without proper cause. Daniel flipped through the pages, his expression hardening. This confirms what I already suspected. It's not just one branch. It's systemic. Later that day, he sat across from Gabrielle Torres, a civil rights attorney with a reputation for winning impossible cases. Her office walls were lined with framed settlements against some of the largest banks in the country. She reviewed the documents carefully before looking up. What you've gathered is powerful, but if you want lasting change, we must prove this is institutional, not just anecdotal. That's my goal, Daniel replied. I'm not here for a single man's downfall. I want to change how the entire institution operates. Torres leaned back, studying him. You could walk away, invest elsewhere, and no one would fault you for it. If I walk away, nothing changes, Daniel said firmly. The next person who looks like me but doesn't have my resources will face the same humiliation. Inside Summit's downtown branch, Robert Hale continued his routine, though whispers among employees had grown louder. His reprimand sat quietly in his personnel file, but he remained in place. At a staff meeting, his voice carried the same clipped tone. We need to be vigilant about security. Certain individuals are looking to create situations they can use against us. Be respectful but firm. A young teller raised her hand nervously. What exactly does that mean? Hale gave a meaningful look. Use your judgment, and be especially careful with customers who might cause trouble. The coded message was clear. Several employees exchanged uneasy glances, but no one challenged him directly. At headquarters, Franklin Price sat with Sarah Lee, frustration etched on his face. Every attempt to reach Daniel has been ignored. Every email, every call. The only response we get is that he's reevaluating his relationship with us. With respect, Sarah said quietly, perhaps we should focus on fixing the real problem instead of just repairing the image. Price waved a hand. Damage control comes first. The reputation of the bank is on the line. Find a way to bring him back to the table. What Price didn't know was that Daniel had already positioned himself at the very heart of the table. As Summit's board debated the mysterious surge in stock acquisitions, Daniel's ownership quietly climbed higher. And as if fate had chosen the moment, a whistleblower from inside the bank stepped forward. Her name was Emily, the same receptionist who had watched helplessly as Robert humiliated Daniel in the lobby. She met Daniel in a small cafe, sliding a USB drive across the table. Her hands trembled, but her voice was steady. Everything you need is here. Complaints against Hale, Settlements buried with non-disclosure agreements, altered performance reviews. He blocked promotions for every minority employee under his watch. Daniel didn't touch the drive immediately. You realize the risk you're taking? Emily's eyes hardened. My grandmother couldn't get a home loan here in 1983. My mother couldn't in 2001. I thought things had changed when I joined the bank. They haven't. I don't want protection. I want change. Daniel finally slid the drive toward himself. You'll have it. Across the city, Hale grew paranoid. He noticed unfamiliar faces visiting the branch, staying longer than usual, watching interactions closely. He didn't realize they were investigators documenting every instance of bias. In an impromptu staff meeting, he announced new policies. Effective immediately, all non-routine transactions require secondary identification. Use discretion, but be thorough with high-risk profiles. A veteran teller frowned. What's considered high risk? You know exactly what I mean, Hale snapped. Within days, customer complaints spiked by 40%, most of them from minority clients. Regional management demanded an explanation. Hale blamed it on heightened fraud attempts, but the truth was spreading faster than he could control. Meanwhile, Sarah Lee dug deeper into Daniel's background. She uncovered his patents, his tech empire, his philanthropy, and, most concerning of all, the holding companies that had been buying Summit's stock. For a long moment, she stared at the connections forming on her screen. She closed her laptop, saying nothing. Her loyalty to the bank wavered as she weighed what she knew against what she had seen. By the third week, Daniel's ownership stake had risen to 23%. The board called an emergency meeting, their speculation running wild. Was it a rival bank? A foreign investor? A hostile takeover attempt? They would soon learn the truth. Morning came with a chill in the air, but inside Summit's towering headquarters, the atmosphere was anything but calm. The boardroom buzzed with nervous energy as directors whispered, each one speculating about the mysterious shareholder who had quietly amassed nearly a quarter of their stock. Franklin Price paced at the head of the table, rehearsing defensive strategies. Whoever this investor is, they're clearly setting us up for a hostile action. Our job is to protect shareholder value and independence. The doors opened at precisely 9 o'clock. Daniel Carter walked in, flanked by his legal team. His midnight blue suit shimmered under the lights, gold cufflinks catching every eye. The room fell into silence. Several executives recognized him instantly, their expressions turning from confusion to dread. Franklin froze mid-step, his voice faltering as he tried to recover. Welcome. I'm Franklin Price, CEO of Summit National, and you must be Dr. Daniel Carter, Daniel said smoothly, taking his seat at the center of the long mahogany table. We were scheduled to meet 3 weeks ago about a $1.2 billion investment. Unfortunately, circumstances in your lobby changed that discussion. Gasps echoed softly around the room. Franklin struggled for composure. There seems to have been a misunderstanding. Perhaps we could address that incident privately. There was no misunderstanding, Daniel interrupted firmly. And nothing about this conversation will be private. He opened his briefcase and laid a thick report on the table. His attorneys passed copies to every board member. This contains documented evidence of discriminatory practices across your branches. Independent investigators gathered these findings. Whistleblowers inside your own institution confirmed them. This is not speculation. This is fact. The directors flipped through the pages, their faces paling as the numbers spoke louder than words. Franklin cleared his throat, clinging to whatever authority remained. Dr. Carter, I'm sure we can reach some arrangement to address your concerns without drastic action. A private settlement, perhaps. I'm not here for a settlement, Daniel replied, his voice steady and commanding. I'm not here for revenge either. I'm here to fix what is broken. He stood, looking each board member in the eye. I now own 23% of this bank. I have the capital to gain a controlling interest. I have evidence strong enough to trigger federal investigations. And I have no hesitation to use either if necessary. But my goal is reform. He laid out his demands with precision. An independent audit of all discrimination complaints from the past decade. Mandatory anti-bias training with measurable outcomes. A complete overhaul of executive diversity. A community accountability board with real authority. And transparent lending criteria applied equally to all. Some directors shifted uncomfortably, calculating losses and risks. Others looked genuinely shaken. Only one voice broke the silence. Sarah Lee raised her hand. I've seen the evidence. I support Dr. Carter's proposals. What happened to him, and apparently to countless others, is unacceptable. We can lead this industry in change or be dragged into it by scandal. The words hung in the air. Daniel nodded slightly toward her before continuing. Every day people like me walk into places where our worth, our humanity, our time is dismissed because of how we look. I could afford to walk away. Most cannot. They need banking services, loans, opportunities, and they deserve equal treatment. Franklin tried one last time to stall. Such sweeping reforms require time and study. Perhaps a committee effort. No committees. No delays, Daniel cut in. His tone silenced the room. The problems were public. The solutions will be public as well. I've scheduled a press conference for tomorrow at 9. Either you stand beside me to announce these reforms or I announce your failures alone. The choice is yours. The boardroom dissolved into hushed panic. At last, Franklin slumped into his chair. We'll vote. One by one, reluctant hands were raised. The motion passed. Daniel's phone buzzed silently in his pocket as his team confirmed the acquisition of another 4% of shares. He had just secured an even stronger shield against resistance. The following morning, the press conference drew cameras from every major outlet. Daniel stood at the podium, flanked by Franklin Price on one side and community leaders on the other. His voice rang with clarity. Summit National Bank is committing to systemic reform. These initiatives are not promises. They are measurable, enforceable changes. Equal service, equal opportunity. Not just words, but action. Reporters pressed forward. Dr. Carter, was your decision to purchase Summit stock driven by personal discrimination you experienced here? My investment decisions are always based on value, Daniel answered evenly. And I believe true value comes when institutions serve every community fairly. That is where growth lies. Another voice cut through the crowd. What about accountability for those who engaged in discriminatory practices? Franklin shifted uneasily. We are conducting a thorough review of personnel, and appropriate actions will be taken. As the cameras clicked, news outlets carried the story worldwide. Civil rights organizations praised the reforms. Other banks scrambled to announce their own reviews. Desperate to stay ahead of the wave, in a quiet office, Robert Hale sat frozen before his television screen, disbelief twisting his face as the man he once humiliated now dictated the future of the bank. His phone rang. Human Resources requested his immediate presence to discuss his employment. 6 months later, Summit's flagship branch bore a new sign: Community Banking Center. Equal service, equal opportunity. Customers of every background filled the lobby, greeted with the same respect. Emily, once the nervous receptionist, now stood as the confident branch manager. Loan approvals were processed blindly, names and photos hidden to ensure fairness. Complaints of discrimination had plummeted. In his office, Daniel reviewed reports showing profitability up 12%, minority business loans up 64%, and community satisfaction at historic highs. He had not only changed a bank, he had shifted an industry. Later that evening, he encountered Robert Hale unexpectedly outside a downtown cafe. The former manager looked smaller, humbled, no longer shielded by authority. Dr. Carter, he said quietly. Mr. Hale, Daniel replied. I'm working with a nonprofit now, teaching financial literacy in neighborhoods I once ignored. I'll never undo the harm I caused, but I'm trying. Daniel studied him for a moment. Change is possible, he said finally. But it begins with confronting the truth. They parted ways without bitterness, but without friendship either. Only a silent acknowledgement that justice, when pursued with resolve, can reshape even the most stubborn systems. For Daniel Carter, the humiliation in that bank lobby had become the spark for transformation. What began as prejudice and arrogance ended in reform, accountability, and hope. And though the struggle for equity was far from over, the cycle of change had already begun. One decision, one voice, and one man refusing to be silent.